Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories only said 2 words. It's mine. And the crack they made echoed under that chandelier like a gunshot. 280 guests stopped breathing at the same moment. One phone somewhere in that ballroom was showing a small red light. And in the space of about 4 seconds the entire course of my life changed direction. The next morning I woke up with bandages on my head, and the clip had reached 5 million views. After that night, after what that camera captured, they could no longer write my story for me. My name is Nora, and I need you to understand where I was standing and why before I can tell you what happened. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. It means more to me than you know. I was near the service entrance of the Grand Ballroom at the Rich Crown Hotel, a position I had always favored at family events. Close to the exit, full view of the room, far enough from the center that no one would notice me noticing them. The air in Cedar Falls, Colorado is supposed to be clean and thin and sharp with altitude. But inside that ballroom it was thick, suffocating. The scent was overpowering. Thousands of wild mountain flowers trucked in and arranged to look effortless, layered over the yeasty sweetness of expensive champagne and the heavy cloud of designer perfume. I held a glass of water. The ice had long since melted. The crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than my first car, threw fractured light across the polished stone floor. As an interior designer and restoration specialist, I could tell you that room was technically flawless. It was also a beautiful, expensive lie. And everything in it, every one of the 280 guests, revolved around a single point of light. My sister Serena Hart. She was radiant in a way that felt almost aggressive. Her white silk dress was not just worn. It was inhabited, clinging to her like a second, more perfect skin. Her laughter, a sound she had spent years cultivating to be both musical and irresistible, drew the circle of people around her tighter and tighter. She was the center of everything. She always had been. I watched from my corner and felt the familiar role settle over me like an old coat. I was the quiet one, the functional one, the one who knew how to fix things, to carry things, to make things work without being seen doing it. I was the shadow that made her brightness visible. Then I heard it. The sound of a silver spoon tapping a champagne flute. Ting, ting, ting. My father, Raymond Hart, stood near the towering wedding cake in his custom tuxedo. The string quartet faded mid-note. 280 voices dropped to silence. He beamed, spreading his arms wide. A man performing generosity for an audience that adored him. But I was not looking at his smile. I was smelling the bourbon rolling off him in warm, familiar waves, cutting straight through the flowers and champagne. I knew that smell. I had grown up knowing it. To everyone else in that room it was a charming patriarch in his element. To me it was the scent of what was coming. "Welcome," he boomed, his voice filling the room like something solid. "Welcome, friends, family, and to my new son-in-law Marcus, we are so blessed to have you." His voice softened with practiced tenderness. My daughter Serena has always been a light, a joy, the heart of this family. And on this, the most important day of her life, her mother and I wanted to give her something truly, truly special. The room leaned in. Phones came up. "Linz is hungry." "We are thrilled," my father declared, spreading his arms even wider, "to announce our gift to the happy couple. The house on Maple Lane." The air left my body. Not a gasp. A vacuum. The room tilting. The chandelier light smearing into streaks. The house on Maple Lane. My house. The house I had found as a condemned, waterlogged ruin. The house I had poured every dollar I had ever saved into for 3 years. The house whose every beam, every wire, every restored plank of flooring I knew by touch in the dark. The room erupted. Cheers, whistles, a rolling wave of applause. A woman near me whispered to her husband, "Raymond is so incredibly generous." A cousin I hadn't seen in years caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up, assuming I was in on it, that the quiet older sister had finally done something worth noticing. More phones came up. Everyone turning to capture Serena's perfectly timed, tearful surprise. They all assumed I had agreed. That I, the background blur, the functional shadow, had simply handed over the thing I built with my own hands as a wedding present. I felt the cold stone wall against my back. I looked at my father, basking in the applause for his magnificent, impossible lie. I looked at Serena, already crying photogenic tears, accepting congratulations for a prize she had not earned. And something inside me, a piece of wiring that had been fraying and sparking for 30 years, finally snapped clean through. I pushed off the wall. I did not run. I did not shout. I simply began to walk. My heels, low and practical, clicked against the stone floor. Sharp, rhythmic, cutting through the applause like a metronome. Click, click, click. The crowd parted. The applause died. Faces turned. I stopped a few feet from the bridal table, directly in front of my father. His smile was still in place, but his eyes had gone cold. The bourbon was swimming in them. "What is it, Nora?" he said, his voice a low warning. "Come to congratulate your sister." I looked at him. I looked at the 280 people watching us. I looked at the phone with the small red light. "That is a lie," I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. It carried. The silence that followed was not just heavy. It had texture. Thick and suffocating and more total than the applause had ever been. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you where I came from. Because none of what followed makes any sense without understanding the 30 years that built up to those 3 words. Let me take you back to the beginning. In the Hart household, there was no value in making things. There was only value in being seen. And in our house, all the light and air and attention went to Serena. She was the golden girl. Her laughter was the soundtrack of our home. Her mood set the emotional weather for everyone in it. She was bright and magnetic, and she knew exactly how to perform. I was not jealous of her. That is important. It was simply a law of nature, like gravity. Serena was the sun and I was a dim planet in her orbit, useful for stabilizing the system but never the center of it. My father, Raymond, taught his lessons without words. He taught with his eyes. When I was 14, I tried to help him repair a sagging fence post in the backyard. I lifted the sledgehammer, braced my feet the way I had seen him do. He did not shout. He did not explain. He simply walked over and took it from my hands, his grip firm and final. "Heavy work is for men, Nora." He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way you state a fact about the weather. I learned that lesson not from his words but from the splinter in my palm, and the burn of shame in my stomach as I stepped aside and watched. He would praise my good eye for color, but never my good hand for structure. Structure was his domain, and that imbalance poisoned everything. When I won my first regional design award in college, a minimalist chair I had designed and built entirely myself, I brought the plaque home. At dinner I set it on the table. Raymond glanced at it while chewing his steak. "'Kay," he said, and turned to Serena. "How was rehearsal, Sari?" 2 weeks later, Serena was cast as third lady from the left in a community theater production. She had maybe 4 lines. My parents bought 24 roses and opened the good champagne. My mother, Elaine, cried tears of joy. She was just luminous, she kept saying, dabbing her eyes. I watched them toast. My design award gathering dust on a shelf behind Serena's old dance trophies. I did not feel anger. Not then. What I felt was cold clarity. The rules were simple and permanent. My work was invisible. Serena's presence was the achievement. I left home at 19. Not in a dramatic scene. I just could not breathe there anymore. I got a small apartment above a hardware store. I worked 2 jobs. Mornings as a barista, fueled by cheap coffee and the noise of the espresso machine. Evenings as a runner for an architectural firm, carrying blueprints and sample books and absorbing everything I could. I saved every dollar I did not spend on rent and instant noodles. My dream was not glamorous. It was a pile of bricks. A condemned, waterlogged wreck of a house on Maple Lane. The city had tagged it for demolition. The roof was gone in 2 places. The foundation had cracks you could fit your whole hand into. But I saw the bones. I saw the solid 19th century foundation and the good honest lines beneath all that damage. And I decided, when they do not give you light, you light your own lamp. My mother, Elaine, would call. Her voice always soft and wrapped in concern. "Nora, honey, why are you working so hard? It is not healthy. Family is what matters. Family is first." But her family first was a velvet glove over an iron fist. It did not mean we support each other. It meant you will conform to the family story. It meant your needs come after the family's image. Her comfort was a form of control. A warm blanket designed to smother any spark of dissent before it could catch fire. While Serena was being sent to Europe to find herself, I was honing my craft. I was sketching on napkins during 10-minute breaks. I was measuring joists and learning electrical code from library books at midnight. I salvaged materials, pulling old-growth timber from demolition sites, begging leftover tile from construction crews. My nights smelled of pine and wood glue and primer. My hands were permanently calloused, my nails broken. A thin layer of drywall dust settled into the creases of my skin. In those years of solitary work, I learned something that took me a long time to name. Prolonged silence is not peace. It is just a scream that has been swallowed. It sits in your chest, dense and heavy, waiting. It is the pressure building in a sealed pipe, and one day the pipe will go. Serena and I grew into two different species. She learned how to receive praise, gifts, attention, opportunity, all accepted with graceful, practiced ease as if it were simply her birthright. I learned how to do without, how to build, earn, create from nothing, how not to need. This asymmetry was not just a family quirk. It was the premise for everything that was waiting for us. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know some of you listening to this right now have felt exactly this. The particular exhaustion of being the one whose work goes unnoticed by the people who are supposed to love you most. Of setting things on the dinner table and watching someone look straight past them. If that is you, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. It matters more than I can explain just to know I am not alone in this. And stay with me. Because what happened when I finally finished that house, when my family came through the front door for the first time and saw what I had built, is where this story really begins to turn. The first day I stood at number 47 Maple Lane, I was not holding keys. I was holding a crowbar. The neighbors behind their curtains did not wave. They shook their heads. They saw a carcass, a failure waiting to happen. And they were not wrong. The roof was a wreck of rotten timber and missing shingles. The foundation had branching cracks you could fit your whole hand into. The front porch was not just sagging. It was actively peeling away from the house in a slow structural grimace. That first winter was the crucible. The furnace in the flooded basement was completely dead. I could not afford a new one, not after putting every cent I had into the deed. So I lived in the attic. A small triangular space under the eaves with one window I had sealed with plastic sheeting. I slept on a cot under 3 heavy blankets and my winter coat. I woke in the dark with my breath pluming in the air, and the water in my glass frozen solid. I worked my 2 jobs. Came home to the ruin. Worked for 3 more hours by generator light until my fingers were too numb to hold a hammer. I was fueled by cheap coffee and a cold hard rage that I had convinced myself was determination. I started with the bones. You cannot heal the skin until the skeleton is sound. I learned to walk the attic joists, prying out rotten rafters that crumbled in my hands and smelled of damp and a century of decay. I learned to sister new beams to the old, bracing the spine of the house with fresh strong timber. I learned to use a hydraulic jack to lift a sagging corner millimeter by millimeter, the whole structure groaning in protest, until it was level again. Then I went to the foundation. Weeks on my knees in the mud of the crawl space. I learned to mix my own mortar, getting the consistency right by the feel of it in my gloved hand. Slow, agonizing, backbreaking work. My trowel scraping and smoothing in the dark. My hammer became part of my body. Its rhythm was my heartbeat. Thud. A nail driving into new wood. Thud. A piece of old useless lath breaking free. Thud. Every swing was an assertion. I am here. This will stand. Every wheelbarrow of debris I hauled out, shattered plaster, rusted pipes, insulation that had turned to sodden nests, felt like a piece of my past breaking away. I was not just emptying a house. I was emptying myself of every okay dismissal, every year spent as a shadow, every dinner where my work was glanced at and set aside. I found the window at a salvage yard, a beautiful Gothic arch pulled from a demolished church downtown, shattered in a dozen places. The lead cames twisted and broken. I bought it for almost nothing. I spent an entire month of evenings at a rented workbench, meticulously taking it apart, cleaning every single piece of colored glass, relearning how to cut and wrap and solder. My fingers were burned and sliced by the time I heaved it into the frame I had built for it on the stair landing. The afternoon sun hit it, and the light that spilled onto the floor was not just light. It was cobalt and ruby and deep clear emerald. It was the first truly beautiful thing in the house. It was a promise. The floors were next. Original wide plank oak buried under 3 layers of history. I rented a drum sander, a beast of a machine that fought me the whole time, threatening to rip itself free and take a wall with it. I wrestled it for days, my arms vibrating, my ears ringing, my whole body coated in a fine choking dust. But when I put that first coat of finish down, the wood woke up. The grain emerged, a deep swirling pattern of gold and amber. The light from my stained glass window no longer fell on a dead floor. It spilled like warm honey across something living. I learned the electrical code. I pulled my own wiring. I learned plumbing, sweating copper pipes in the crawl space, the smell of flux and the sharp hiss of the torch becoming its own strange comfort. I made mistakes. I flooded the kitchen floor twice. I had to rip out an entire wall of drywall because I had miscalculated a load-bearing stud. I failed and I learned and I kept going. I read code books until my eyes blurred. I watched grainy videos of old-timers framing walls. I learned from the men at the lumber yard who had looked at me with pity when I first came in and now nodded with a quiet respect. Still at it, Reyes, one of them would say, loading my truck. Slowly, agonizingly, the house began to stand up straight. It felt like it was taking its first full breath in 50 years. The doors I had planed and rehung now closed with a soft, solid sound instead of a rattling screech. I built a new front porch, dug new footings, set new posts. From salvaged scrap steel I welded a porch swing. I hung it from thick chains, sat on it and listened. No drips. No creaks. No wind whistling through cracks. Just the sound of the evening breeze in the pines on Maple Lane. The neighbors who had watched from behind their curtains started stopping by. Old Mrs. Brennan from 2 doors down brought me a glass of lemonade, her eyes wide. Nora, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's just a miracle. And then my family came. They came on a Sunday. My mother Elaine brought a casserole as if visiting an invalid. My father Raymond walked through the front door, his heavy shoes loud on my honey-oiled floors. He walked through the living room, looking at the exposed brick I had painstakingly chipped clean and repointed. He tapped the custom-built kitchen cabinets I had designed and built from scratch, the birchwood planed and joined by my own hands. He ran a palm over the countertops made from thick recycled butcher block I had sanded and sealed until they glowed. He looked at this world I had made from nothing. He turned to me. So, he said, his voice completely flat. Why did you waste all this good money on a pile of ruins? Serena, standing beside him, wrinkled her nose. It's so brown, Nora. All this wood. Aren't you going to paint it white? It would look so much cleaner. I didn't answer. I just took the casserole from my mother's hands. I stopped inviting them after that. Not a fight. Not a confrontation. I just stopped. The calls came. Why haven't we seen you? I had my answer ready. The house. So much work still to do. And the house became my fortress. The one place on earth not defined by them. That did not ask me to be smaller. That did not see my work as something to redirect, dismiss, or claim. Then my professional world found it. My friend and colleague Jacob Marsh, who ran his own restoration firm and had once helped me hoist the main ridge beam during a sudden hailstorm, came by one evening. He walked through the whole house in silence, just touching the joinery on the staircase, the smooth plaster of the walls. He sat at my kitchen island and I poured him a cup of cheap coffee. He looked around, his eyes resting on the light coming through the stained glass window. Nora, he said, his voice quiet. This is a miracle. I shook my head. No, Jacob. It's labor. That labor became my entire professional identity. Number 47 Maple Lane was a better business card than any website. A wealthy client who had hesitated about hiring me saw the house and hired me on the spot to restore their historic Victorian property. That contract led to 2 more. Then 3. My name was no longer Nora, the quiet daughter. It was Nora Reyes Restoration Design. My work was solid. My reputation was earned. And my house was the proof of both. But as the house settled into its strength, as the paint finished curing and the new grass in the yard grew thick, something else began to grow with it. An unearned sense of ownership from my family. A strange possessive we started creeping into their conversations. We should really have Thanksgiving at your place, my mother would say. We should host the neighborhood Christmas party there, my father suggested, as if it were his own idea. The right to claim, which had been entirely absent when the house was a ruin, began attaching itself to every finished surface. They had not wanted the ruin, but they desperately, confidently wanted the triumph. This is the moment in the story that I think about the most, because this is where the real danger lived. Not in my father's rage or my sister's entitlement, but in this quiet, gradual creep of assumption. In the way the people who had never helped carry a single beam suddenly started saying we when talking about the thing I had built alone. If you have ever experienced that specific feeling of watching someone claim ownership of what you built the moment it became worth claiming, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me your story. And stay with me. Because the pressure that had been quietly building for months came to a head at a Sunday dinner about 3 months before the wedding. And what my father said to me at that table was the moment I understood exactly what they were planning. It was a mandatory Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The air was thick with the smell of roast beef and my mother's heavy-handed perfume. My father, Raymond, was already a little drunk. The bourbon had been appearing earlier and earlier as the wedding preparations ramped up. So Nora, he said, not looking at me, his focus on carving the joint. Serena and Marcus are going to need a proper place to start a family. They'll need room for children. I sipped my water. I'm sure they'll find a lovely place. He paused the knife. You've got that big house all to yourself. Seems like a lot of space for one person. It was not a question. It was a probe. A soft, deliberate insertion of an idea, delivered so casually it was meant to feel like common sense. My mother chimed in immediately, her voice syrupy. A family home is such a blessing. It is a legacy, something meant to be shared. She passed the gravy, her smile fixed and bright. We have always believed in keeping the family together. Melted butter poured over poison ivy. Legacy and shared were her preferred instruments. Words that sounded like generosity but were shaped like a cage. Then Serena, picking at her salad, her new engagement ring flashing under the dining room light. It's true, Nora. We were just talking about it. That lovely south-facing room you use as your studio. It gets the most beautiful light. It would be absolutely perfect for a nursery. I put my fork down. The click of silver on porcelain was loud in the sudden quiet. They all looked at me. An expectant, smiling tribunal. This was the moment the performance was supposed to begin. I was supposed to blush, to hesitate, and then to graciously offer up 3 years of my life. That's my studio, I said, my voice even. And that is my house. It is not available. The smiles flickered. Serena pouted. A perfected look of disappointment she had been deploying since the age of 5. My father's jaw tightened. He went back to the beef. My mother's face went smooth and blank, her most dangerous expression. Well, she said, forcing a bright laugh. Let us not talk about it now. More potatoes, Raymond. But the seed had been planted. And in the weeks that followed, the language changed. Asking became assuming. Became when. My father's casual probes hardened into declarations. He would call me, his voice already thick with an afternoon bourbon, and say things like, I was talking to Marcus's father. I mentioned the Maple Lane house. They are very impressed. He was not telling me. He was informing me of a decision he had already marketed to other people. When I reiterated my position, he said, don't be selfish, Nora. This is for your sister. This is for the family. Selfish. The word he had always used to hammer me back into the shape he needed. The word that meant you have something I want and you are not giving it to me. The real escalation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on site at a client's Victorian restoration project. My phone buzzed with a notification from my doorbell camera. I opened the app. There on my front porch, on the swing I had welded with my own hands, stood Serena, laughing. Beside her was Marcus, her fiancé. She was pointing at my front door, talking animatedly, and he was nodding. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small booklet. Paint swatches. I watched my blood go cold as she held sample cards up against my front door. The deep forest green the first had custom mixed. She was testing new colors for my house. I called her. She answered on the third ring. Hey Nora, we were just in the neighborhood. Get off my porch, Serena. What? Don't be silly. We were just looking at paint colors for the house. She paused. You know, for when it becomes ours. You are trespassing, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You and Marcus need to leave right now. Oh, stop being so dramatic, she laughed. We're just planning. Honestly, Marcus thinks you are being completely unreasonable about this. You have 10 seconds before I call the police. The laugh died. I heard her hiss something to Marcus. The camera feed showed them scrambling off the porch, their faces a picture of indignation. A text arrived a moment later from Serena. You're ruining everything. But it doesn't matter. You'll give it up eventually. You always do. I drove to the hardware store and bought 3 new high-grade deadbolts. I spent the evening installing them, my drill biting into the solid oak frames I had built myself. I felt like I was barricading myself inside my own life. That night I could not sleep. The house felt different. Violated. Around 2 in the morning I heard a sound from the new front porch. A distinct footstep on the board I had just replaced. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. The feed was dark but the motion detector had caught something. A shadow at the edge of the frame near the steps. And then it was gone. I sat there until dawn with every lock in the house engaged, holding my phone like it was the only solid thing in the world. The final piece clicked into place 2 days later. A text from my mother arrived at breakfast. Innocent and cheerful. Just confirming you're coming to the final dress fitting on Saturday. So excited. And then at the bottom, as if added as an afterthought. Please honey, whatever you are feeling, don't make a scene on Serena's big day. It would just destroy her. Family first. I put my phone down on the butcher block counter. The coffee in my mug was cold. I understood. It was not a request. It was a threat. They were not going to have this fight with me in private where I could show them the deed, the receipts, the calluses on my hands. They would not risk a fight they might lose. They were going to do it in public at the wedding in front of 280 witnesses. They were going to announce it as a grand gesture, a beautiful loving surprise, and they were going to box me in. They would use my love for my sister, my lifelong training in putting family first, my fear of being the one who ruins everything as a weapon against me. Don't make a scene. They were counting on my silence. The silence they had been cultivating in me for 30 years. A new kind of anger, cold and precise as a chisel, settled into my stomach. They had mistaken my quiet for weakness. They thought that because I had absorbed their dismissals for 3 decades I had no voice left to use. I opened my laptop. I created an encrypted folder. I scanned my original deed of sale. The paid-in-full property tax records for 3 years, all in my name. The invoices for the lumber, the electrical panel, the copper piping, the roofing shingles, the drywall, thousands and thousands of dollars, all from my business account. Then I picked up my phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call Serena. I called Jacob Marsh. He picked up on the second ring. His voice calm over the sound of a distant sander in his workshop. Nora, what's wrong? He could always tell. I told him everything. The dinner, the paint swatches, the text from my mother. He was silent for a moment. The sander stopped. So they're going to try and steal your house in front of a live audience, he said. That is the plan, I said. "'Kay," he said. He was not emotional about it. He was structural just like me. You have the deed. You have the receipts. You have the invoices. You have the electronic trail. You are prepared. But Nora, he added, his voice careful. Your father is a man who is used to writing the rules. Men like that do not hear no. They hear a challenge. If he pushes, we build a legal wall so high he cannot climb it. I hung up with the cold resolve hardening in my chest. I was going to the wedding. I was going to walk into their trap with my eyes wide open. And I was going to be the wall. Engagement break. I want to pause here for just a moment because I know some of you are probably thinking, why did she go? Why walk into something you already know is a trap? And the honest answer is this. If I do not show up, they tell the story without me. 280 people walk away believing the version where I simply gave my house away out of love for my sister, and I become the grateful background character in a story about Serena's beautiful new life. I was done being the background character. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have walked in? Or walked away? Tell me in the comments. And stay right here because what happened when I walked into that ballroom, when my father's voice filled that microphone, and what I did in the 11 minutes that followed, is something I will carry in my body for the rest of my life. The reception at the Rich Crown Hotel was a masterpiece of illusion. The grand ballroom was a sea of white carpet and mountain wildflowers, their sweet cloying scent mixing with the smell of expensive wine and roasted lamb. People laughed, their voices bright and brittle under the blazing crystal chandeliers. I had chosen a simple navy dress. Understated, easy to move in. I found my position near the main service entrance, my back to a cold pillar, holding a glass of water. A designer assessing a faulty structure, waiting for the inevitable collapse. At precisely 8 o'clock the sound I had been waiting for cut through the room. Ting, ting, ting. Raymond Hart stood at the head table, tapping a silver spoon against his champagne flute. The string quartet faded. The laughter and chatter died. He beamed, his face flushed with bourbon and occasion. He raised his glass in a wide expansive gesture that took in the entire room. Friends, family. His voice boomed, amplified by the microphone, silencing every last whisper. My beautiful daughter Serena and my new son Marcus. What a day. What a perfect day. Polite applause. Serena glowed beside him, her face a perfect mask of bridal joy. A day this important, he continued, deserves a Real foundation. He paused for effect, his showman's timing impeccable. And so it is my incredible honor to announce a gift to the happy couple from our family. From her older sister. He turned and gestured, not to me but to the space where I should have been, near their table. Quinn, my wonderful daughter, has decided, in an act of incredible generosity, to gift her beautiful restored home on Maple Lane to her sister and new husband. The room exploded. Not just applause. A roar. Whistles, cheers, people leaping to their feet. Bravo, someone shouted. How generous, a woman cried out, dabbing at her eye. They were applauding a lie. A grand, beautiful, orchestrated theft. I looked at my father, bathing in the sound, his arm outstretched, accepting congratulations for a generosity that was not his. I looked at Serena, who had perfected her look of stunned, tearful gratitude, as if this was the first she had heard of it. She and Marcus were embracing. This was the trap engineered to perfection. I was supposed to be frozen by the weight of public expectation, forced to smile and nod and participate in my own dismemberment. My hand was steady. My glass of water did not tremble. I set it down on a passing server's tray, and I began to walk. I stepped out of the shadows. My navy dress was a slash of darkness against the sea of white and champagne silk. Click, click, click. My heels on the stone floor. The only sound as the applause faded. The room fell silent with a new kind of energy. Confused. Anxious. Wrong. Faces turned. My mother Elaine saw me first. Her smile froze. A flicker of pure panic crossed her eyes. She knew. I stopped directly in front of the head table. I looked past Serena, past Marcus, and directly at my father. His smile had become a thin, hard line. The bourbon was radiating off him. Nora, he said into the microphone, his voice a low warning. Come to add your congratulations. I did not need a microphone. My voice was clear and I pitched it to Carrie. That is a lie, I said. The silence was no longer anxious. It was absolute. A vacuum. 280 people stopped breathing. I never agreed to that. My father's face, which had been flushed with pride, turned a mottled dark purple. The mask did not slip. It was gone completely. What did you just say to me? He hissed. I said that is a lie, I repeated, my voice louder. I am not giving away my house. You will not, he snarled, stepping down from the platform, jabbing his finger toward my face. You will not embarrass me. You will not embarrass this family. You are embarrassing yourself, I said. And I saw it then. The flash of pure, uncontrolled rage behind his eyes. This was the real Raymond Hart. The man the bourbon always revealed. The man I had known in fragments my entire childhood. His hand shot out. His fingers, thick and strong, clamped onto my shoulder like an iron hook. It is my house, I said, my voice ringing out like a bell. I built it. It is mine. Not anymore, he roared. And he shoved me. It was not a stumble. It was not an accident. It was a full-body assault, his shoulder and all his weight pivoting and driving me backward. My feet left the floor. There was one terrible moment of weightlessness, and then impact. My back and then the back of my head slammed into the marble-clad pillar. The sound was not a dull thud. It was a crack, sharp and wet and intimate, tearing the air apart. The sound of bone connecting with stone. My water glass shattered on the floor. For a moment there was no sound at all, just ringing in my ears. Then the screams started. High and piercing. Multiple voices at once. Oh my God, call 911, he slammed her into the wall. Someone shrieked. Trisha, call 911 right now. I slid down the wall, but I did not fall. I caught myself, my hand flat against the cold stone. A sharp sting bloomed at the back of my head, and then a sudden shocking warmth. I touched my hair. My fingers came away dark and glistening in the chandelier light. Blood, hot and fast, already rolling down my neck. I looked up. The room was chaos. People standing, chairs scraping. But my eyes found two things. First, I found Serena. She was frozen, her hand over her mouth. But her eyes were not on me. They were not looking at the blood. They were wide and scanning the crowd. Scanning the phones that were all pointed not at her but at the scene. She was watching her perfect day implode. She was still performing. Then I found the young man by the bar. He had not flinched. He had not lowered his phone. He was still filming, his grip completely steady. And in the top corner of his screen I saw a small red rectangular icon, glowing steadily. It was not just recording. It was live. In the distance, cutting through the ringing in my ears, I heard the rising sound of sirens. A woman I did not know rushed forward, pressing a white linen napkin to my head. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I know," I said. My father finally looked at what he had done. He looked not at me but at the blood. He looked at the phones. He heard the sirens. He saw his world dissolving in real time. He tried to rewrite the script. "It was an accident," he stammered, his hands raised, his voice thin and suddenly weak. "She slipped. She is overwrought. It was just a family misunderstanding." But the voice that had boomed with such authority just 3 minutes before was nothing now. No one was looking at him with anything except horror. No one believed a single word. The lie was broken. Irreversibly, publicly, permanently broken. I have to stop here because even now when I describe that moment I can feel the cold of that stone against my palm. I can feel the warmth spreading through my hair. And I can feel something else too, something I did not expect to feel in that moment. Clarity. Everything was suddenly completely clear. Every question I had ever had about whether I was wrong, whether I was being difficult, whether family really did come first, answered itself in about 4 seconds. Do you think I should have done something differently? Do you think I should have stayed silent, taken the house back in private, handled it quietly? Tell me honestly, because I still think about it. And stay with me for the last part. Because what came next, the hospital, the charges, the trial, and where my house and I ended up, is the part that took another year to unfold and changed everything I understood about what I had built. The world snapped back into focus under the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room. The chaos of the ballroom, the screams, the shattering glass, the sirens, replaced by the sterile quiet of a hospital corridor, and the bitter smell of coffee burning somewhere down the hall. A doctor with kind, exhausted eyes finished his work. "Clean laceration," he said. But it went right to the bone. 7 staples. He paused, reviewing my chart. "You also have a mild concussion. You were very close to blacking out." He looked at me over the chart. "Someone hit you." "My father," I said. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone further away. "He shoved me into a wall." The doctor nodded with the measured calm of a person who has heard many terrible things. "We are required to report this. The police are waiting outside." When they came in, there were 2 of them, a man and a woman. Their faces were not clinical. They looked angry. "Ms. Reyes," the female officer said, "we have already taken preliminary statements at the hotel. We have at last count 34 mobile phone videos plus the live stream. The Summit Crown is fully cooperating and has provided overhead security footage covering the entire incident from multiple angles." She closed her notebook. "We have clear documentation of a felony assault. Your father, Raymond Hart, is currently detained." She looked at me, her expression softening fractionally. "I have to ask the official question. Do you wish to press charges?" I thought of my father's hand. I thought of the bourbon on his breath. I thought of the word selfish used like a hammer my entire life. I thought of the stained glass window on my stair landing, the one I had found in pieces and spent a month making whole. There was no hesitation. The person who might have wavered, the girl trained from childhood to put family first and absorb everything quietly, she had died on that ballroom floor. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely." The officer nodded once, sharp and satisfied. I was discharged at dawn. The sky outside was a pale bruised gray. As I walked out, staples itching in my scalp, I saw him. Jacob Marsh, leaning against his truck in the ambulance bay. He was not wearing his work clothes. He was wearing a dark gray suit and a pressed white shirt. The suit he wore to meet with bank presidents and city council members. He looked solid and immovable like a load-bearing wall. He did not rush over. He did not offer pity. He just opened the passenger door. I got in. He walked around, settled into the driver's seat. And for a moment we just sat in the quiet with the engine humming. "How's the head?" he asked. "Stapled," I said. "Okay." He put the truck in gear. "I've already made the call. Her name is Victoria Lane Vale and Associates. She handles complex property disputes and criminal matters with property motive. Seem to me you have a foot in both worlds right now." "Thank you, Jacob," I said, and the words felt completely inadequate. "We start with the documents, Nora. We go to your house. We gather everything. Then we let Victoria go to war." Victoria Lane's office was the opposite of my house. Where I had warm wood and reclaimed brick, she had floor-to-ceiling glass, chrome and black leather. She was a tall woman with sharp features and an unervingly steady gaze. She did not offer coffee. She offered a seat. Jacob laid out the folder. The deed. The tax records. The digital archive of every invoice. She reviewed 3 years of my life in under 10 minutes. She closed the folder. "The house is yours. Legally ironclad. This is not a property dispute anymore. It is a criminal matter with a property motive." She turned to her screen. "First move is defensive. I am filing an emergency restraining order against Raymond Hart, Elaine Hart, and Serena Hart, barring them from coming within 500 feet of you or 47 Maple Lane. I am also filing a temporary injunction against any transfer of title and notifying the county recorder. As of 10 o'clock this morning, that house is in legal lockdown." She turned back to me. "Second, we build the offensive case. I need every threat, every piece of coercion, the texts from your sister, the phone calls from your father, the dinner where they first suggested you hand it over. From this moment on you are an evidence locker. You do not speak to your family by any means. Any communication they send you, you screenshot, save and forward directly to me. We are building a timeline of premeditated intent to defraud, culminating in a violent assault when you refused. Is that clear?" "Yes," I said. It was the clearest thing in the world. The first test came that afternoon. My phone lit up with a voicemail from my mother. I played it on speaker for Victoria. Elaine's voice was a wreck of tears and pleading. "Nora, darling, please, what are you doing? You have to stop this. He is your father. He loves you. You are destroying this family. You are destroying your sister's life. Call it off, honey. Please. Family is first." I looked at Victoria. "She is not apologizing," Victoria said, her voice completely flat. "She is not asking if you are okay. She is making his actions your responsibility. She is using guilt to pressure you into dropping a felony charge. This is not a plea. This is a control tactic. Save the audio file. Label it coercion attempt 1. An hour later a text arrived from Serena. "My wedding is ruined. My life is ruined. Marcus is horrified. His family is talking about having the marriage annulled. This is all your fault. I hope you're happy." I stared at the words. My fault. I thought of her face in the ballroom, eyes scanning the crowd, performing her shock for the audience instead of looking at the blood running down my neck. My fingers moved over the screen. I did not hesitate. "This is my life," I typed. I hit send. Then I forwarded the screenshot to Victoria. Victoria, meanwhile, had drafted a press release and sent it to every major news outlet in the state. 2 sentences. Ms. Nora Reyes is recovering from injuries sustained in an assault at the Ridge Crown Hotel. She is cooperating fully with the Cedar Falls Police Department in their ongoing investigation. All inquiries regarding the undisputed ownership and title of the property at 47 Maple Lane may be directed to the firm of Vale and Associates. In 2 sentences, she had legally bound the assault to the property dispute. She had taken my father's lie, a generous gift, and turned it into the documented motive for a crime. The dominoes began falling before the 6 o'clock news. The main contractor for 3 major city development projects announced a review of their partnerships. A bank issued a statement saying they were deeply disturbed by events at the Ridge Crown and were re-evaluating their financial commitments. By Friday, a consortium of minority shareholders in my father's development company had petitioned the board for an emergency session. Their demand was simple and final. Raymond Hart must resign as chief executive. Effective immediately. My mother tried to host a reconciliation gathering at the family house. She invited 20 of her most influential friends. 3 came. They stayed less than 20 minutes. The failure was complete and entirely public. Then a new piece of evidence arrived from an unexpected direction. One of Serena's bridesmaids, horrified by what she had seen on the video, sent screenshots to a local journalist. They were text messages from Serena sent 3 weeks before the wedding. Serena to the bridesmaid. Nora is being such a martyr about the Maple Lane house. She won't just give it to me. Bridesmaid. Wait. It's her house. Serena. Dad is going to handle it. He's just going to announce it at the wedding. She'll have to say yes in front of everyone. It's my day. I get what I want. The screenshots went viral within an hour. They vaporized every remaining shred of sympathy for Serena. She was not an innocent bystander. She was a co-author of the plan. Serena left town quietly shortly after. No farewell. No announcement. She simply vanished like a performer who had walked off stage into the dark. My mother sold the large family house on the hill. It went quickly. A single cream-colored envelope arrived at my house a week after the sale, my mother's handwriting on the front. I opened it. 1 page. Carefully chosen words. Regret for the entire situation. Sadness about the division in the family. A hope that everyone could find peace. It was a masterpiece of the non-apology. A letter that mourned the consequences without once acknowledging the actions. I read it once. I felt nothing. I folded it and put it in a drawer in my workshop. It was just paper. The courtroom smelled of old wood and floor wax and the metallic tang of stale coffee. I sat at the prosecution table beside the assistant district attorney. Victoria sat directly behind me. Jacob behind her, broad-shouldered, hands clasped, completely still. Across the aisle my father sat with his legal team. 3 men in identical dark suits. Raymond himself looked diminished. The bourbon flush was gone, replaced by a gray papery pallor. His eyes were sunk deep in his head. The prosecution calls its first witness, the DA said. The lights dimmed. A screen descended. And the ballroom appeared. The string quartet. The ting of the spoon against the flute. Raymond's voice booming from the speakers. A gift from her older sister. And then me walking forward. That is a lie. I never agreed to that. You will not embarrass this family. It is mine. Not anymore. And then the crack. Amplified by the courtroom speakers. A sharp, wet, percussive sound that silenced the room completely. A woman in the jury box flinched so hard she almost dropped her pen. The video played on. The screams. The chaos. The close-up of my father's face contorted with rage, and then his sudden panicked pivot. It was an accident. She slipped. The DA clicked the remote. The image froze. The lights came up. The jury was silent. Their faces were set. The rest of the trial was meticulous. The doctor clinical and clear. The young man who had live-streamed, his hands shaking slightly as he gave his testimony. The hotel manager, confirming the authenticity of the overhead security footage. Witness after witness building the same simple, devastating timeline. The plan to seize the property. The lie told to 280 people. The calm verbal refusal from the rightful owner. The violent physical punishment for that refusal. The 911 calls. The medical report. Victoria took the stand. The deed. The authenticated text messages from Serena, confirming the pre-planned announcement. The timeline drawn in ink, not paint. The loving father was a co-conspirator. The generous gift was a premeditated theft. The jury was out for 45 minutes. We stood when they filed back in. On the charge of assault in the 2nd degree, the foreman said, standing looking directly at me, "We the jury find the defendant guilty." A sound tore from my mother's throat somewhere behind me. Low and animal. I did not cry. I did not smile. I just let out a breath. A long, slow, full breath that I felt I had been holding for my entire adult life. And the massive, crushing weight that had lived in my chest since childhood simply dissolved. I turned and looked at my father. He was no longer the patriarch. He was a pale, shrunken old man in an ill-fitting suit, staring at the dark wood of the table. And slowly, finally, he bowed his head. The judge signed the permanent order of protection at sentencing, a lifetime restraining order barring Raymond, Elaine, and Serena Hart from ever coming within 500 feet of me or my property. It was the boundary I had tried to build with words. Now it was set in stone and filed in ink. Now it was a fact. I did not feel victorious. I just felt light. The pressure was gone. The house and I could finally breathe. Tell me in the comments. And if you have dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The following Saturday I opened my front door, and the living room that Serena had once dismissed as too brown was full of light and motion. The first Maple Lane restoration workshop was in session. 6 students, young apprentices and older homeowners, gathered around a salvaged 19th century window frame. Look at the joinery, I said, running my fingers over the joint. This is not nailed. It is locked. The person who built this 140 years ago intended it to last. Our job is not to replace it. Our job is to respect it, to stabilize it, to help it continue its story. They leaned in, touching the wood, their faces full of concentration and discovery. My house, which had been my fortress, was now a school. It was breathing again, filled not with tension but with sawdust and the sound of quiet, focused work. On the wall of my studio, the south-facing room that had been called perfect for a nursery, I hung 3 things in simple black frames. The first was a crumpled, stained invoice for lumber, my very first purchase for the house. The second was a dark, grainy photograph from that first day, showing the collapsed roof and the waterlogged floors. The third was a clean, crisp blueprint, my own hand-drafted plan, with the title written in the corner block. Maple Lane Rises. My own archive. My own evidence. My own history. Jacob stopped by that afternoon as the students were packing up. He brought 2 cups of coffee and unrolled a set of fresh blueprints on the butcher block island. I have been thinking, Nora. The workshops are incredible. But what if we made it permanent? He tapped the drawing. We could convert the ground floor into a community space. A gallery for local artisans. A public classroom for the preservation trades. I walked over to the main staircase. The late afternoon sun was hitting the landing, pouring through my stained glass window. The light it threw on the restored oak floor was breathtaking. A pool of liquid ruby, deep emerald, brilliant cobalt. So vivid it looks solid. Spilled paint caught in time. It was the physical proof. The testament of the hands. What you could do when you took the broken, shattered, discarded pieces and put them back together with patience and labor. You could make them throw light. I walked back to my laptop. An email was waiting. From the Maple Street Women's Advocacy Group. They were asking if I would consider joining their board of directors to help build a new program for women rebuilding their lives. Women who, like me, needed to learn how to build their own walls. I looked at Jacob's blueprints. I looked at the light on my floor.